Alright, it's Gabriel, and I'm just going to talk a little bit more. So, I just left off saying there are some truths that our religion is rooted in Sumerian culture. So, I just want to talk a little more about Sumerian language. So, ancient Sumer used letters that are similar to cuneiform, or I believe they're identical to cuneiform in some places. Like Sumer lasted a long time, and their records indicated that they had kings, for the last like 500,000 years, I think. So the kingships actually got shorter 50,000 years ago. But anyway, so they had cuneiform, and then that cuneiform was similar to the text used by Babylonians, and then Akkadians and the Canaanites and Phoenicians all had texts that kind of descended, and then Hebrew descended from that. So, I kind of jumped around. I'm just gonna see. So I'll just give one example. So in Sumerian, Kar is a mountain, and in Hebrew, Har is a mountain, and then in clay, flesh, blood, and man all are from the root dome. So Adam, Adamah in Hebrew. So that's kind of that kind of tells you that people were made on earth. So Hebrew is like a more writable version of Phoenician, and in the Sinai you can see Hebrew texts that are written in Phoenician. So that is a huge, that's huge, and it's just a display that, we are using second or third hand material for our religion. So hopefully, it hasn't been compromised, but obviously, as I've already said, it has been. All right, and then one interesting thing is that they were actual double hours used in the Bible, so it was a 12-hour day instead of a 24-hour day. So, what I'm trying to get at here is the Sumerians had flaws in their religion probably as well, if they're getting it from these fallen beings. Even though there has to be disclosures about the truth, there probably still are flaws. So, like, as valuable as it is to look back, the things Jesus said I still would put above Sumer, but he also said salvation is from the Jews, so it's worth taking a look back as well. So what happened in Sumer after the flood is that they instituted a series of human kings. So things changed in that way, that the ruling elite stopped being these like people who are ruling for 25,000 or 20,000 years. The last two kings on the record ruled for 20,000 years. And so, yeah, those were much shorter rules, actually, than, like, Tammuz, who ruled for 36,000 years. So, that's a very interesting, like, reality. And then they shifted into having human rulers afterwards. And the things that they quote from the Book of Giants, or the things that the Old Testament quotes from the Book of Giants and the Epic of Gilgamesh, relate to certain aspects of the flood narrative and other things where God is kind of given personified attributes like enjoying the smell of burnt offerings and things like that. So I'll put a link in the description where you can see more about this stuff, but it's very interesting to learn more about it. And I have notes here. I'm just trying to reference them to make this work better. But yeah, a big one is just that the cross of Tammuz is still worshipped today. And like Enki was the horn god, and we have the horn god Baphomet or Baal. I don't know which one. Baphomet definitely has horns. I don't know if Baal does too. And then, so if you read the Epic of Gilgamesh, his planet was taken away by snakes. And that could be a reference to the thing that happened 50,000 years ago, or it could be a reference to just... I mean, Gilgamesh was a giant himself, so it's hard to say it's hard to say which being Gilgamesh is representing there. If Gilgamesh is trying to, like, represent human subjects, or if Gilgamesh is actually a giant that faced competition 50,000 years ago from this other group of beings with enlarged skulls. And like David Wilcock has said that there were two competing groups, like the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds are like considered competitors, but they both have elongated skulls. So, you know, just take what you want from it. I don't have all the answers, but it's just worth kind of looking into what these similarities are between the forms of Judaism and other like Sumerian writings or ancient texts. And then like the Bhagavad... Oh, and then so... here we go. Here's one thing I want to say. Got it. All right. So the rib, Namu, I believe her name was, when she created man, Nintu, sorry. So Nintu is Lady of the Rib, and she creates the primitive worker. When she, in the stories from ancient Sumer, when she is denied, basically when the flood happens, she's denied, there's no more humans around, and she thirsts. And she is also associated, or she also a part of the same group of Nephilim or whoever with Ishtar. And we have Easter Island, we have Esther in Judaism, and Easter, which is supposed to be the celebration of Passover. But anyway, so we have Nintu, she's thirsty, and we have Ishtar. And Ishtar is known for filling up all the wells with blood and making sure all anyone ever consumes is blood. So it's like, is Nintu also consuming blood and then getting thirsty during the flood when she doesn't have access to humans? So that's pretty dark, but that's kind of what I'm getting at here is like, all right, so in ancient Sumer, we have these groups of entities, and they are consuming humans, and that is disclosed in these ancient texts, and Then we have things like Easter Island. We have a lot of religious celebrations about Easter, or Ashtar. And on Easter Island, there's many giants that were found. I mean, it's like recorded history that when people went to Easter Island, they saw giants. So there's a lot of other interesting stuff, like Din Gur is a way of describing God, and it means like holy or just and fire. So like there's a holy fire, and it's associated, or it's depicted with a rocketry symbol. So that's like pretty clear that we have extraterrestrials being called gods. And then, I don't know, I think that pretty much sets like the stage in terms of the pre-Abrahamic covenant. So we have all this crazy stuff going on, and it continues after the flood, because we know that Noah tried to preach a different way of living, like right before the flood happened, because he was a good dude. And we know that Noah's descendants became Abraham, and then God created a new covenant with Abraham. So, Abraham existed pretty much right after the flood. And we know that the flood happened 12,000 years ago, according to Graham Hancock. So that gives us our timeline. So, like, in terms of, like, modern Jews that are, like, well-known, we have about a 13,000 year ago window when they started to become more kind of capable or independent, or I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like, clearly if Noah had some kind of resources to act, that there was some form of independence, and that kind of goes back to the idea of the